The East Tower, the West Tower, the East Coast, the West Coast. To get from the East Tower to the West Tower, you gotta go down the elevator, go around the block, and enter that building? Or does the secret passageway connect them? Getting from the East Coast to the West Coast, it's a 5-hour flight. Is the killer from the East Tower or the West Tower? Is the killer from the East Coast or the West Coast? Let's solve Only Murders in the Building, Season 4, Episode 2, Gates of Heaven. Mabel and Oliver begin investigating the Arconia's West Tower and get trapped inside an ominous game. Meanwhile, Charles is visited by two individuals from his complex past. We'll be breaking down each episode for clues, suspects, and red herrings on the hunt to learn who shot Sazz. Picked up Sazz's body, then, carried it out of Charles's apartment to the furnace chute, dropped her down the furnace chute, then went back into Charles's apartment and cleaned up most of the blood and glass. But admittedly, they missed a spot of blood on the oven door handle. So we should never hire them for a maid, but they're pretty good at multitasking. Who is that? Spoilers for all the episodes that come before this in Only Murders in the Building. If you haven't seen all these episodes, pause this video, put your Christmas decorations up before Halloween, and then come back and watch. Use the timestamps below to jump to the topic or suspect that you want to hear, and skip past stuff you don't want to hear. If you're someone who's been on this journey with us since Season 1 of Only Murders in the Building, I want to give a heartfelt thank you. Thank you. This whole experience has been so fun, and every member of the Clue Crew and all your theories and deductions are really brilliant and fun. These videos are only part of it. If you watch them on YouTube, go down in the comments and read all the brilliant theories people have. If you're listening on audio podcast, look at us on social media, see all the things, all the tweets and theories we get. We're at PHQ on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Facebook.com/PHQ. You can email us, hello@PPmedia. We love talking to you. Now let me speak to somebody who's maybe never seen our videos before. At the end of this video, thanks to some brilliant feedback we got from YouTuber Kit Katz, we're gonna have to look at handwriting again, and I'll be reviewing the infamous Howard theory, which we have been talking about since Season 2, probably since Season 1, really, when it all is said and done. And so if you've been with us all these years, you may want to skip that part because we'll just be reviewing all the stuff we already know about Howard and the things we think about him. Now, for all our returning listeners, let me offer you a unique thing. At the very end of the podcast, after we read some great feedback, I'm going to offer up a mystery I need you guys to solve. If you don't mind trying to break down clues from trailers. We're going to be talking about that at the end of the podcast. Time for the Double C credit clues. The opening credits has a nice hanging ham, perfect for your bathroom. The closing credits, oh hell! It's the cards from the game as well as our little porky friend. Last week I had read from critics that each episode in Season 4 has been given a title to reference a classic movie. Now, Gates of Heaven, if you go just by that title, is a documentary by famous director Errol Morris. I saw his documentary, The Fog of War. A lot of people have seen his documentaries, Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control, or The Thin Blue Line. This one is his very first documentary from 1978. It's a documentary about a pet cemetery in California and the people who have pets buried there. Certainly on Only Murders in the Building, there have been plenty of famous pets, including Winnie the dog, including Howard's first cat, Evelyn. Stay tuned for our Howard theory coming up after we run down all the suspects. Before we run down the suspects, let's see what Episode 2 taught us about the victim, actor, stunt double, Sazz Pataki. There has been a lot of debate over the Sazz faked her death theory. We'll look at how Episode 2 supported the Sazz faked her own death theory, as well as how Episode 2 made it look like that theory may not be correct. We're going to do that in just a minute. And at the end of the podcast, we'll cover some of your great feedback on both sides of the debate. But now, let's look at the actual facts we learned in this episode. Sazz's father was a stunt person himself, Slim Pataki. She says that she comes from a long line of stunt people. We see Sazz's mom and dad. Was she an only child? Sazz and Charles worked together for almost 40 years. Now, when it was time to do a stunt, Charles would freeze. Sazz would tap in. This episode showed that she did leave a message written in blood. Tap in. Jan says that Sazz believes Charles gave her the shot that started her life. Who gave her the shot that ended her life? The West Tower is completely isolated from the East Tower where Charles lives. That means if the killer shot Sazz from the West Tower, they would have to go down the elevator or take the stairs, walk around the block, enter the Arconia, walk up the stairs or take the elevator to clean it up and to grab the body and dump it in the incinerator chute. One thing that seems a bit odd, wasn't Jan across the courtyard from Charles's place? Wouldn't that have made her a Westie? And it sure didn't seem like people were leaving the building and re-entering the building when they went to see Jan in season 1. Sazz's first love of Hollywood, actually she mentions a documentary, which you wouldn't think would have stunt people in it, Gates of Heaven. She says she likes it because it let real people be themselves. Is our killer a real person or an actor? Sazz says she takes hits for her guy Charles. Jan claims Sazz called her on Thursday, the night she was killed, upset about something. In season 1 of Brazos, Sazz did an impressive stunt. Her hair caught on fire. She was doing it all for Charles. She even tried to help him out socially. She made up a poker game to help him have some friends on the big film set. Charles claims Sazz is his oldest and best friend. According to Jan, Sazz was suspicious. She thought someone might have eyes on Charles, and she was poking around the building, thought there might be another killer in the building. Now let's get to a different theory about Sazz. There's this Dudenoff apartment. That apartment certainly could have been Sazz's place, right? She had the door key code. She knew the Dudenoff name. We're told that she was watching Charles. A great place to watch Charles would have been from this empty apartment across the way. The key code to the apartment is Oh Hell, the name of this card game. Now Sazz, as we know from Charles, did she create a second card game? Did she look at lonely Vince Fish and think, I need to get him socializing? Did she tell him, hey, these neighbors down the hall are playing a card game called Oh Hell? Did she bring them together just like she brought Charles and that film crew to play poker together? We know one of the notes says look in or looking at Charles. Again, this would have been perfect from the Dudenoff apartment. In season 3, she told Charles she had been hearing things. The Dudenoff apartment has a ham radio. Is Sazz the person who's been using the Dudenoff apartment? There's certainly some hints that she is. Now let's debate this did Sazz fake her own death that we talked about in episode 1. You watch this episode, episode 2 of season 4, and with these emotional scenes of Charles grieving Sazz, it seems like that would be weird if she wasn't actually dead. Also, the show has Charles talking to Sazz's ghost. Would a show do this if Sazz was still alive? Doesn't seem possible. That said, if you look at the actual clues and things that are being told about this mystery, there's still plenty of hints that Sazz is still alive. Again, how in the world could a killer have shot her from the West Tower, gone all the way down, come around the block, come all the way back up, gotten into Charles's apartment, cleaned up all the blood, dragged Sazz's body to the incinerator chute? That's an awful lot of stuff for one person to do. It might imply there are more than one killers, but this is starting to feel far-fetched. It'd be much more rational if Sazz faked it. If Sazz did know about the Dudenoff apartment or was using it to watch Charles, what are the odds she would be killed from the apartment she was using? This episode also gave us a motive for why Sazz might fake her death. She was trying to break up with Psycho Jan. We know what happens to people who break up with Jan. See Tim Kono. It'd be smart for Sazz to fake her death. There's also a very important line from Sazz at the beginning of the episode. She says, "You always fall, but the trick is to get back up." So once again, we saw Sazz in season 3, episode 10 fall. Has she done the trick where she could get back up? Now, if Sazz is faking her own death, when would she reappear? Well, the critics have received the first 7 episodes of the season. So does she show back up in episode 7 or episode 8? Or do we trust the first part of this? There's no way the show would have us focus on Charles and his grief and then turn around and make all that pointless by having her still be alive. Finally, let's look at this Oh Hell passcode. Now again, it's a number, but when you hold it upside down, the 3 becomes an E. There was another item on Sazz's desk, which read West Tower, which had a backward 3 style E. Later on, in our theory section, we'll look deeper into that note and thoughts about the backwards 3E. Now let's look at the suspects. Jan is back! Ooh, boy. How'd she get out of prison? Well, we won't bore you with the deets, but there's blood and brain on her shirts. Youch. Jan is not a fan of snipers, but she's also heartbroken. She says that Sazz called her last Thursday and sounded very worried. Thursday was the day she died. Now, I mentioned this earlier in this podcast. Jan, I'm pretty sure we were supposed to believe Jan lived on the opposite side of the courtyard from Charles, and they would play music back and forth in season 1. Wouldn't that make her a Westie? But the show certainly didn't imply that people were leaving the building and walking around the corner to get from Charles's apartment to Jan, so maybe she was on the middle section? What do you guys think? Was Jan a Westie? And this West Tower is very odd. Apparently it's filled with smaller apartments and people who rent instead of own. One family that appears to rent instead of own is this family with Father Alfonso. He's a family of huggers. This is the family that plays the card game Oh Hell. Alfonso is keeping a Portugal ham in his bathroom, and if you win in the game, you get a delicious slice. Listeners, help me out. Is this bathroom ham? Is this a 30 Rock joke? Where's this coming from? In a family that makes sauce, Mother Inez is definitely saucy. She is a big Brazos fan. Charles is her hall pass. Wow. She loves dressing up and looking good for Charles, who the family claims is the one watching them. They're not watching Charles. He's the one who keeps checking her out. Daughter Anna, there may be more to Anna, let's be honest. She's not a smiler. Her mom has to tell her to fix her face. And Anna has this one line where she says Charles has brittle bones. Why would Anna think this? Vince Fish, a.k.a. Vince Fish, or as Charles calls him, Stink-Eye Joe, Twitchy-Eye Joe, highly contagious, antibiotic-resistant Pink-Eye Joe, Vince Fish. He's got a big heart, enlarged heart. Boy, get this guy to a hospital. Vince is a big fan of the Kids in the Hall comedy sketch where you can squish the little people. Now, Vince claims his eye patch is because he has pink eye. But if you watch the Olympics, you know that a lot of sharpshooters like to cover one eye to help their aim and focus when firing their guns. Vince knows where Charles's apartment is, where Mabel's apartment is, where Oliver's apartment is. He knows everybody in the East. But he couldn't have shot from there because he claims his windows are painted shut. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas all the time, guy. He's wearing Christmas sweaters all year long. Now, one thing to think about, Bev Mellon's Only Murders movie, based on the podcast, that's supposed to be released by Christmas. Well, we know what Christmas all the time guy wants for his present. Now, we saw something that we believe might be tinsel in the Dudenoff apartment, but think back to season 1. Back in season 1, Oliver thought an item they found at Tim Kono's apartment was a sex toy, or maybe it was a cat toy, but it turned out to be a bassoon cleaner. Is this really tinsel, or is it something else? Maybe something that comes from film negatives. Hey, let's look at this mystery person, the Dudenoff. The Dudenoff place has a lockbox on it with a code. Both the Saucy family and Vince Fish are hesitant to talk about the Dudenoff apartment. They know what's going on in there. I'm not from New York, but part of me wonders if this is rent control. As long as, quote-unquote, Dudenoff never leaves the apartment and doesn't leave his lease, the Arconia couldn't raise his rent. Is that what they're trying to do? Is that what they're trying to hide? Maybe they're trying to hide this pig, which can't be kept as a pet, and the only way to have it is to have it in this fake apartment. The Dudenoff place is a dump. There's a ham radio, but it's a dump that somebody's been in recently. There's a footprint on the radiator. The window has been pried open and there are paint chips everywhere. Mabel calls it spacious for a studio apartment. It's got that tinsel by the radiator. Some people like to call Hollywood Tinseltown. Is that a sign that this is kept by a Westie, a West Coaster Westie? There's this adorable pig in the bathroom. Ham in one bathroom, pig in this bathroom. Thank God we didn't see Vince Fish's bathroom. From the big three this week, Oliver, I don't really have any clues or anything other than I LOL'd so hard when he said Charles could have permanent Sazz hands. Oh, don't take it back, Oliver. That really made me laugh pretty hard. Charles Hayden Savage. Didn't we all think he'd be higher rated on People Magazine's Most Beloved Cop of 1991? Charles is going through some stuff. One thing the show provided was a great image of Charles's wall behind his TV, and there's writing on it. You and I, is anybody a good eyesight internet detective to say what is written on the wall behind Charles's TV? Mabel Mora. We know Mabel could be a great decorator, and she's currently not living in the Arconia. Is it possible she'll take over this Dudenoff place? What do you think? Subscribe, like, leave us a comment. Before we get to your feedback, let's look at our tinfoil hat theory / Howard theory. We got this great feedback from YouTuber KitKats385. KitKat sent us this message on our Facebook page, and she wrote, "Did you notice that the West Towers note on Sazz's desk matches the note way back on season 1 that was posted to Oliver's door? Specifically, there are 2 different types of the letter E in the notes. So here on this note sent to Oliver, there's an E that actually looks like the number 3 reversed. So there's a curvy E, and then there's a very hard line E in this note that was once again left on Oliver's door back in season 1. Now, on Sazz's desk last week, we saw this, which says West Tower. Notice the E in West is that kind of curvy E, the backwards 3 E, but the E in Towers is, hard lines. Now, the thing about that note back in season 1, it was considered a threat and possibly the reason why Winnie the dog was poisoned. And if you look at another item on Sazz's desk, there's a thing called sick pup. Could that refer to Winnie the dog being a sick pup because it was poisoned? Again, this comes to us from our good friend KitKats385. She created a video a couple of months ago called Finding Out the Mastermind in Only Murders in the Building. Really fun video. Be sure to check that out on her YouTube channel. And of course, this leads us into the infamous Howard theory. I've been talking about it so much since season 2 that I'm sure many of our listeners are sick of me talking about it. Feel free to skip this. But if you haven't heard one of our previous podcasts where we talk about the Howard theory, we're going to go through it now and maybe add in some new things that we've never actually said before, so our returning listeners get something out of this. In Season 2, Episode 3, this is the Bunny Folger flashback episode, they introduced this shot of Howard's handwritten notes from the Arconia board meeting. When I saw this back when Season 2, Episode 3 premiered, I was screaming from the rooftops, and I always say it's my non-humble brag that I was the first person to go on Reddit and say, "Oh my God, look at Howard's handwriting from the Arconia board meeting." I was the first one to put it in a YouTube video and a podcast. I was like, look at this, look at this, look at this. Howard's handwriting from the board meeting is identical to the note found in the dumpster in Only Murders in the Building Season 1, Episode 1, which reads, "I'm just tired of feeling lonely. I don't want to be this lonely anymore." Again, we've already pointed this out multiple times, but how do we know that Howard wrote this? Well, his notes from the board meeting, his lowercase i's have this little flag on them, this little curve at the bottom, as do his lowercase l's. They match. The e's match. So, okay, we found out in Season 2, Episode 3 that Howard wrote this "I'm so lonely" note. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, what's the big deal? Why is that such a big deal? It's such a big deal because in the final episode of Season 1, Charles claims that, hey, Jan, I know you're the killer because the J in a note you wrote matches the J in this note, "I'm just tired of feeling lonely." Now let's talk about how this note was found. It was found in Season 1, Episode 1 in a dumpster. It's implied that this "I'm so lonely" note was in a trash bag that Tim Kono had. We saw that Tim Kono got this trash bag from Jan. How did Jan have a note that said "I feel so lonely" that Howard wrote? Now, this is just so peculiar, right? Why would they do this? This is something the producers specifically did to make the handwriting the same. In Season 1, Episode 10, Charles says, "Jan, you're the killer because the J in your note matches the J in this lonely note." But then literally in Season 2, Episode 3, they reverse that and show that Jan didn't write the "I'm so lonely" note. Why did they do it? Is it a continuity mistake? Well, it's an odd continuity mistake. Admittedly, the J's do look similar in both handwriting, but again, the lowercase i's are completely different. Howard's i's have that little hook on the bottom of them. Jan's don't. Now, this could easily be explained by saying, hey, Jan and Howard just happen to write both capital J's the same. But again, why do it? It's so specific. It seems to have been done on purpose. And then the question becomes, well, what was that purpose? So that's Season 2, Episode 3, and they don't really touch upon it or do anything with it in Season 2. But something odd happens at the end of Season 2. The actor who played Howard, Michael Cyril Creighton, he gets suddenly bumped up. He gets signed to be a series regular starting on Season 3 and Season 4. And they only did this for Howard. Like, for example, the actor Jackie Hoffman, who plays Uma. She wasn't signed to be a series regular, nor was the actress who plays Ursula or the actor who plays Lester. Like Howard, those are funny side characters who could show up and certainly make the jokes they always make, but only Howard was bumped up to series regular. Now again, this could just be as simple as the writers, the producers, they love writing jokes for Howard. But there could be another reason. When you're a series regular, you are tied to the show. Jackie Hoffman, who's a guest star, she plays Uma, and she's hilarious. Let's imagine that she got hired to be a series regular on a different show, like HBO's The Gilded Age. If The Gilded Age was filming at the same time as Only Murders in the Building, Jackie Hoffman, Uma, she would have to be on the HBO Gilded Age. She would be tied to that contractually, and couldn't be free to go film on the Only Murders in the Building schedule. So is it possible that the producers, the showrunners, signed Michael Cyril Creighton to a series regular role because they need the character Howard to be available whenever they film? Like, he has to be available for them. Why would the character Howard need to be available to Only Murders in the Building? Well, he'd need to be available if he had an important role that you couldn't give to a different character. It had to be him. Why would it have to be Howard? Maybe he has some sort of tie to all the crimes. Howard's cat was there in Tim Kono's apartment when he was killed. Howard was on the Arconia board with Bunny, and Bunny got killed. Howard was working on Death Rattle when Ben Glenroy got killed. Howard is in the building. He's the one asking, hey, where is Charles? When Sazz is killed. Now, this could all be coincidence, but could Howard have some role in all these unique deaths? Not going to spoil it again, but there is an Agatha Christie book where one character is not necessarily the killer, but has ties to many deaths. I won't say which one it was. Now, why would Howard want to kill Charles? Well, Charles did desecrate the corpse of his beloved cat, Evelyn. And then Charles took Evelyn's leg and kept it in his freezer. I'm not saying that's a motive for murder, but would you kill somebody if they did something to your beloved pet? Now, having said all this, there is the flip side. If you know anything about famous TV mysteries, one of the first comedy murder mysteries, like, ooh, who did it, was the Who Killed Peter Campbell mystery on the TV show Soap. The writers and producers, they planned for it to be one character. They introduced one character into the show because they intended to make this character the killer. And then what ended up happening, the audience laughed and loved this comedic character so much that the producer realized, oh no, I can't make this character the killer, because if they're the killer, they have to go to jail, and then they wouldn't be able to be a part of the ensemble and be funny. So even though they left a bunch of clues pointing to character A, they had to switch the murderer to be a different character because they didn't want to lose this laugh machine that the audience had fallen in love with. So there's even in my mind a chance that if they thought Howard was going to do something and be kind of a mastermind, a kind of a ghost, a phantom of the Arconia, there's a chance that they know the audience laughs and loves Howard so much that we don't want him to be evil or tied to this. So that's kind of all the Howard stuff we've talked about. There's more out there, but if you're new, this is the thing I reference when I'm always saying things like, boy, I am burned out on pointing the finger at Howard. Okay, let's leave Howard behind and let's get to your feedback. Player Coach wrote, hey, I can't believe how quickly you make these videos that you put on YouTube and these podcasts. I wrote back, yeah, it's a real LOL. This is more information than you want to know, but I watch the show when it's released on Disney Plus Hulu. That means Monday night at midnight my time. I pause the video, I take a bunch of notes, and I finish around 1 a.m. Then I wake up at 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning, capture the show onto my computer so I can show screen grabs and clues on my video. At work, and I do have a 9-to-5 job, I write the script and I pull your feedback. I should be doing work at work, but hey, what they know doesn't hurt them. Then I get home from work around 5:30, I edit and export the video at 1 a.m., release it Wednesday morning, repeat. I hope you guys enjoy it. Hey, leave a like if you happen to enjoy these crazy videos I make. We got this feedback from Tana7, aka Cherry Boom Boom. They wrote, could Bev Mellon characters be inspired by the real-life producer Barbara Broccoli? So we've got Bev Mellon on the show. There's the real-life producer of the James Bond films, Barbara Broccoli. I think that could be the inspiration. Now, let me say, I don't think Barbara Broccoli has killed anybody, except James Bond. Spoiler. Josh wrote, dude, think it through. It's called Only Murders in the Buildings, not only people who fake their death in the building. Well, Josh, I know a lot of people don't like the fake death idea. I had to put it in a video because it was the first thing that came to my mind when I started watching season 4, episode 1. I mean, before then, I never would have thought, hey, Sazz is faking her death. But that's what the first episode made me think, so I put it in my video. As I like to say on a lot of my podcasts, who cares what I think? I'm just a guy who should be working on his 9-to-5 and instead is making a podcast. Sunflower Divinity wrote, why was Charles's driver coughing so much? Maybe from breathing in too much smoke from the incinerator? Love that thought. Love it. Valerie wrote, Sazz isn't dead yet. I think she will be dead before the end of the season, though. Is it just me, or does Bev Mellon bear a familiar relationship to Cindy Canning? YMI 2.0 wrote, the dog's job was to find dead bodies. The dog sensed it from the beginning. That must mean there was a dead body there. Therefore, Sazz must be dead. Got Mic'd had a really smart idea. They said, I don't think Paramount Studios would allow anyone fictionally working at their company to be a killer. So I'd immediately rule out all these new characters like Bev, the directors, and the writer. What do you guys think? Is Paramount going to be so safe and say, hey, you can't have somebody who works for Paramount Studios being a murderer? Somebody who always gives great feedback is The Art of Intuition. They wrote, I also wondered if Sazz was dead. Why burn the body and clean up the crime scene? The extra time was not used to, hey, let me kill Charles again. Was Sazz prepared to fake her death and use the murder attempt to her advantage, then go undercover and expose the person who she heard was after Charles? Was she in her apartment making noise? Ooh, good thoughts to have. Holly Goldlightly wrote, this season is all about siblings. I really hope Sazz is alive. She's my fave. Well, we hope so too. And if it's about siblings, we gotta look at everybody, including the brothers' sisters. Random Human 19 wrote, they have showed us Sazz being shot, and I operate that everything that is shown on screen is real, true, and did actually happen. So Sazz was shot, but we didn't see her die. All these things are logically true, Random Human 19. The one thing I would say is that scene where we see, and I put see in quotation marks, see Sazz being shot and killed, that takes place in a dark apartment. We really didn't see Sazz being shot. We heard what sounded like a shot, and we saw Sazz's body fall to the ground. And finally, Dale Ribbons wrote about Brazos. Steve Martin was born in Waco, Texas. Waco, the city, is situated along the Brazos River. Now, there's only one Z in that Brazos, but I love it. Dale continues, it doesn't discount any theory, but it's something to consider. Of all the characters, the one I'm sure who did not shoot or kill Sazz was Charles. He seemed really concerned about where she was, and Charles was devastated in the scene in the boiler room. But of course, that could be what he wants us to think. Maybe Charles and Sazz worked together to find the killer. Charles was always saying, hey, why hasn't Sazz called? Where's Sazz? Where's Sazz? Hey, let's go to Sazz's apartment. Is Charles in on this deception? Whew, crazy, crazy thoughts. What do you guys think? Now that we've read the feedback, here's a mystery for anybody who likes breaking down trailers and trying to discover something. When the Only Murders in the Building Season 4 teaser came out, there were a lot of interesting shots, but the most interesting one to me is this shot of Kumail Nanjiani. Note that he's in focus, but everything else in this shot is blurry. It's artificially blurry. Maybe this is like in a dream sequence where only he's in focus and everything else is blurry. But most likely, everything in the background is blurry because it's a clue they don't want us to know. Why do I think that? Well, look at how it's cropped here. It's like if I did it in Photoshop or After Effects, where I'm doing this rotoscoping of his character, Rudy, and keeping him in focus and then blurring everything else. It doesn't seem like it's professionally done. It seems like it's only been done for the trailer. So what is going on in the background, I wonder? Now, it could just be as simple as that's Eva Longoria in the background, and they didn't want people in the audience to know that Eva Longoria and Kumail were in a scene together. Could be that this is like from episode 10, the final episode, and it's like here all the people in the building are confronting the killer, a bit like they did in season 2 when everybody in the building confronted Bunny's killer. Why do you think this is blurry? What's going on in the background? Internet detectives, let's hear your thoughts. This may be a long podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Once again, you're the important part. You're the reason why we do this. We enjoy it. Give us that feedback. What do you think of these new West Tower residents? Let us know in the YouTube comments. Like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything and it helps us out so much. We'll talk to you next week on episode 3, 2 for the road. Charles, Oliver, and Mabel begrudgingly pay her off with new investigators, the actors Eugene Levy, Zach Galifianakis, and Eva Longoria. Talk to you next week.